Have you ever stood in your own kitchen and felt like a guest in your child's life? The pictures on your wall might still show birthday parties, tiny handprints, messy smiles, but today, you sit across from a phone that doesn't ring, a calendar with empty boxes where visits used to be, and maybe you wonder, not with bitterness, but with quiet ache, when did I stop being someone they needed? It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the tone in their voice when you call, like you're interrupting something, or how they never ask you how you're really doing anymore, how they forget the small things, your doctor appointment, your anniversary, your quiet need for company. And so slowly, the feeling creeps in. This sense of being unimportant. You might not say it out loud. You smile through it. You tell yourself they're just busy, that everyone grows apart a little. But in your heart, there's a space that used to feel full, and now it echoes. You're not alone. And more importantly, you are not wrong for feeling this way. That's why we're here, in this moment. Together, not to judge, not to blame, but to breathe and to begin. Because if your children are making you feel unimportant, the answer isn't to argue, it isn't to beg, or remind, or plead for their attention. It's to stay still, stay silent, and do something far more powerful. Let me tell you about Natalie. She's 69, lives alone in a small apartment, not far from the home where she raised her 2 daughters. For most of her life, Natalie was the do-everything mother, the one who stayed up late helping with projects, baked every cake from scratch, worked 2 jobs when money got tight, and when her daughters grew older, she didn't expect a parade, just a little appreciation, a little effort, a call now and then to say, "Hey Mom, how are you really doing?" But the calls grew short, texts came late, or not at all, and visits, only when they needed something: babysitting, money, emotional support. One day, after rushing across town to help with her youngest daughter's sick child, only to be met with indifference and no thank you, Natalie sat in her car and wept. Not out of anger, out of something deeper, a sense of invisibility, of having become a fixture, not a person. That night, she did something different. She didn't call to check in, didn't text to ask how they were doing. She stayed silent, not out of spite, but out of strength, because sometimes silence isn't giving up. It's choosing not to chase, not to explain your worth, not to plead for recognition you've already earned 100 times over. That silence was the beginning of something new. The next morning, she went for a walk instead of sitting by the phone, bought herself a coffee, smiled at the barista, picked up a library card she hadn't used in years. That afternoon, she dusted off her sewing machine and began working on a quilt she'd always meant to finish. She didn't do any of it to impress her daughters. She did it to remember who she was before she forgot. Because that's the first step when you feel unimportant. You begin to remember your own importance even if no one else seems to. It sounds simple, but it's one of the most powerful shifts you can make. You're not withdrawing. You're returning to yourself, to the rhythm of your own soul. And that brings us to something equally essential. When you're tempted to speak out, to say, "Why don't you call me anymore?" Or, "Why do you only visit when you need something?" Try this instead. Pause. Let the silence speak for you. There's something remarkable that happens when we stop filling every gap. When we stop cushioning the distance with effort, people start to feel the difference. Lily, another woman I met recently, used to send long, thoughtful texts to her son every week, encouraging him, asking about his day, reminding him of things he never thanked her for remembering. And every time she got no reply, she'd think, well, maybe he didn't see it. And she'd send another the next day. Until one day, she stopped, not with a declaration, just with a gentle decision. He knows how to find me. It took 3 weeks. Then one evening, she got a simple message. "Hey Mom, haven't heard from you? Are you okay?" Her heart jumped, but she didn't rush. She replied kindly, briefly, and from that moment, the dynamic began to shift. Not because he changed, but because she stopped pouring from an empty cup. We teach people how to treat us by what we accept and what we expect and what we allow ourselves to carry. And sometimes we teach them by saying nothing at all. That silence, dignified, peaceful, whole, isn't a punishment. It's a mirror. It says, this is how I treat myself now, with care, with space, with patience. The children we raise often don't mean to hurt us. Life simply sweeps them up, and we become too familiar, too available, too easy to overlook. But when we choose to return to ourselves, to our books, our walks, our hobbies, our friendships, something begins to hum in us again. A kind of lightness, a kind of quiet strength. And you know what? They feel it. Even if they don't say it right away, even if they don't come rushing back, they feel it. That shift, that quiet, unshakable dignity, that's what Natalie found. That's what Lily learned. And that's what's waiting for you. Not on the other side of more effort, but in the calm of letting go. There's a hidden exhaustion that comes from trying too hard to stay relevant in someone else's life. It doesn't come all at once. It builds slowly in the countless ways we soften our voices, make our needs smaller, and stretch ourselves just to be easy to love. But eventually, even the gentlest hearts grow tired of tiptoeing. And when your children make you feel unimportant, the instinct is often to try harder, to please, to make sure you're not the difficult parent. But behind that effort is a fear we rarely name. The fear that if we stop trying, we'll be left behind completely. That fear is valid. It comes from love. But here's the hard truth. Chasing love that isn't freely given doesn't bring peace. It brings resentment, and it teaches those we love most that our presence comes without boundaries. Madeline, a retired nurse in her early 70s, once told me, "I thought that by saying yes to everything, I was showing love, but really, I was just showing them how little I valued myself." She used to drop everything when her daughter called, watching the grandkids, running errands, lending money always with a smile, always available. But something changed the day she overheard her son-in-law joke that mom will say yes. She always does. That night, Madeline sat in her quiet living room, tea cooling in her hands, and felt something settle in her chest. Not anger, exactly, something deeper, a realization that her generosity had become so expected. It was no longer seen as love. It was seen as obligation. The next time her daughter asked for help, she paused, took a breath, and said, kindly, "I have plans that day." There was silence on the other end, not anger, just surprise. Because when you begin to shift the way you move in someone's life, they notice, and often, their discomfort isn't about you changing. It's about you no longer meeting a need they've grown used to having filled without question. But that shift is where healing begins. There's a quiet power in not over-explaining your no, in allowing yourself to be unavailable, not as punishment, but as a recognition of your own humanity. Lucas, a widower in his late 60s, had a similar story. For years, he did everything he could to stay in his daughter's good graces. He avoided conflict, never voiced disappointment. Even when holidays passed with no visit, he'd send a cheerful message, pretending it didn't sting. But something in him began to change after a long walk one evening. He passed a couple on a bench, laughing together older than him, holding hands, fully present, and it hit him. I've been waiting for someone to treat me like I matter, but I haven't been treating myself that way. So he did something simple. He turned off his phone for the weekend, went hiking with an old friend, spent 2 days disconnected from the world that had slowly made him feel invisible. When he turned the phone back on, there was a missed call, a message that said, "Dad, are you okay?" I was worried. It was the first time in years his daughter had reached out without being prompted. Sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is create a little space not to push people away, but to let them walk toward us if they choose. Because love isn't proved by how much we endure. It's revealed in how gently we stand in our truth. That truth might sound like, "I won't rearrange my day for last-minute plans anymore," or "I'd love to talk, but I need to be spoken to with respect." Or maybe it sounds like silence, a sacred kind of stillness, where you stop chasing and start observing. What happens when you stop filling in all the gaps? When you let them experience your absence not out of malice, but out of self-respect. Often, the ones who take you for granted begin to notice what it feels like not to have your comfort on demand. And here's the beauty. Your silence speaks volumes, not angry silence, not coldness, but the calm kind that says, I am not going to fight for a seat at a table I helped build. That is not giving up. That is growing up into the elder your life has been shaping all along. One who moves with purpose, not permission. One who listens, not just to others, but to themselves. That's where your next transformation begins. Not by changing them, but by returning to you. Owen, who spent most of his life keeping the peace in his family, told me, "The day I stopped trying to be the perfect dad was the day my kids started talking to me like a real person." He stopped trying to be agreeable, started being honest. And instead of making himself smaller, he let his presence be real, flawed, warm, thoughtful, human, and yes, it was uncomfortable at first. But it also brought something new: respect. You don't have to be soft all the time to be loved. You just have to be true. Because the moment you begin showing up for yourself the way you always showed up for them, that's when things start to shift. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but in small, sacred ones. A deeper breath in the morning, a clearer no without guilt, a moment of joy that doesn't depend on anyone else's schedule. This is the root of quiet power, knowing that you don't have to demand respect to deserve it. You simply need to live as though you do, and trust that the people who are meant to walk beside you will learn to meet you there. There's a certain kind of magic that begins to unfold when you stop waiting for others to treat you well and start treating yourself with the care you've always deserved. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's not about shutting down or hardening your heart. It's about making space for a different kind of connection. One that begins with how you speak to yourself, how you honor your own rhythm, how you choose, every morning, to be someone you can rely on. That shift doesn't go unnoticed. When Claire stopped answering every late-night call from her son, something changed. Not just in how she felt, but in how he responded. At first, there was confusion, then frustration, but after a while, something softened. He called during the day instead. He started asking if it was a good time. He began using words she hadn't heard in years. "Thank you. I appreciate you. How are you feeling today?" She hadn't demanded those things. She hadn't lectured or listed her grievances. She had simply returned to herself, slowly, gently, and the energy around her shifted. That's what happens when we stop chasing respect and begin embodying it. We become like still water, calm, reflective, powerful, not loud, not flashy, but impossible to ignore. And that's when something remarkable happens. People begin to respond to who we've become, not who we've been trying to be. Nathan, a soft-spoken grandfather with kind eyes, used to feel invisible during family gatherings. He'd show up early, help set the table, sit quietly while the others buzzed around, and somehow, by the end of the night, no one had asked him a single question about himself. Then, one day, he arrived later. He wore a deep blue shirt his wife had always loved. He brought a pie, not store-bought, but his own recipe. He smiled, but didn't hustle. He didn't blend into the background. He sat where he could be seen. And when someone asked, "How have you been, Dad?" he answered with truth. Not fine, not keeping busy, but something real. "I've been learning to enjoy my own company." And the room grew quiet. Not awkward, just attentive. Because for the first time in years, Nathan didn't enter the room trying to prove anything. He entered as a man who knew his own worth. And the air shifted. This isn't magic. It's presence. And presence doesn't require performance. It just asks you to show up as you are with all your layers, all your stories, all your quiet strength. That's what living the change looks like. It's not just about setting boundaries. It's about building a life that makes you proud to wake up each day. A life that doesn't hinge on whether your children call or include you. A life that holds beauty, even in solitude. For Abigail, that meant starting her mornings with music instead of news. Lighting a candle before breakfast, taking herself on walks, not for exercise, but for joy. She found a small cafe where the barista knew her name. She brought a book, stayed for an hour, sipped slowly. At first, it felt unfamiliar, like a life she hadn't quite earned. But over time, it began to feel like home. And one afternoon, her daughter called and said, "You sound different lately." Happier, Abigail smiled. "I think I am," she said. And it was true. Because when we stop trying to fix what we didn't break, When we stop chasing people who only notice us when we disappear, we begin to create something better than attention. We create peace, and peace, my dear friend, is not silence. It's presence without pain. It's laughter that doesn't have to be shared to be real. It's remembering that your time, your energy, your company, these are gifts, not obligations. It's sitting in your favorite chair, in your favorite sweater, with a heart that no longer aches for permission to feel full. You don't need their approval to be joyful. You don't need their permission to rest. You don't need their attention to be alive. Because the truth is, you are not just someone's parent. You are a whole person, with stories, talents, wisdom, wonder, and the world still needs what you carry. So let yourself bloom again, in small ways, in quiet moments. Plant something, write something, laugh. Even if no one else hears it, learn something new, not to stay relevant, but to stay curious, because your relevance was never in question, only your reflection of it. And now that you're seeing yourself clearly again, can you feel it? That subtle shift. You are no longer begging for space. You are holding it. And the people around you will either rise to meet you there or fade quietly from the places they once occupied in your heart. And either way, you will be okay. Because you are rooted now, not in who they think you are, but in who you've rediscovered yourself to be. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You only need to stand firmly in your light. If you're still here with me, quietly listening, thank you. That means something, not just to me, but to you. It means you've honored your own heart long enough to sit with its ache and listen for a softer truth beneath it. That takes courage. That takes wisdom. That takes love, the kind you've given freely to others for years, and now, finally, are beginning to offer back to yourself. And if no one has told you this recently, let me say it now. I see you. I hear you. You matter. You matter not because of what you do for others, not because of the birthdays you remember, or the advice you give, or the favors you never ask to be repaid. You matter simply because you're here, because you exist in this moment. With all your years and your softness and your strength, sometimes the greatest healing doesn't come from being heard by others. It comes from finally hearing yourself. So if your children have made you feel unimportant, and you've chosen silence, not from defeat, but from dignity, if you've begun walking the quiet road back to yourself, I hope you feel proud. I hope you know that you are not behind in life. You are not late to joy. You're simply arriving at a version of yourself that no longer needs to be seen to shine. You've been the caretaker, the forgiver, the one who always understood, and now you're becoming the one who is also understood, if only by yourself at first. That's the beginning of peace, and from that peace, so many beautiful things can grow. New friendships, fresh routines, mornings that feel light again, evenings that don't ache with loneliness, but glow with comfort. Maybe you'll pick up that book you've been meaning to read. Maybe you'll sit outside at dusk and feel the wind on your skin like a quiet prayer. Maybe you'll find yourself humming again without even realizing it. These small moments aren't small at all. They are the proof of life returning to its rightful place. Within you, and who knows, your children might feel the shift. They might hear something different in your voice, sense something steadier in your presence. They may start to see you not as a constant fixture in their lives, but as a full person, someone they want to know, not just someone they expect to show up. But whether they do or don't, that no longer defines your joy. Because this time, you're not loving from emptiness. You're not offering more than you have. You're living from fullness, from peace, from self-respect, and that is powerful. You don't need to fix anything. You don't need to wait for an apology that may never come. You don't even need to change them. You only need to honor yourself. That alone has the power to change everything. So before we end our time together, I'd love to ask you something. Has your relationship with your adult children changed over time? Have you ever felt overlooked or unimportant? And if so, what helped you move through that? If you feel comfortable, I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Because sometimes, hearing from someone who understands is the exact medicine we need. And who knows, your words might be the light someone else was searching for today. And if this message made you feel just a little more seen, a little more steady, I hope you'll stay connected here. Click subscribe if you'd like, not out of habit, but because you believe your voice belongs in a space where dignity, healing, and hope are honored, where we walk the road together, quietly but firmly, because this journey doesn't end here. You'll wake up tomorrow with the same beautiful soul you had today, and maybe, just maybe, a little more peace in your step, a little more softness in how you hold yourself. You've given so much to this world, and now it's your turn to receive, to rest, to rise gently, fully, just as you are. And if no one calls today, let the silence be your companion, not your judge. Sit with it. Wrap yourself in a blanket, light a candle, play your favorite song, and remind yourself, you were always enough. You still are, and you always will be. There's something sacred about endings, not because they're final, but because they ask us to pause, to breathe, to gather all the pieces we've uncovered and hold them with care. So here we are at the edge of this shared moment. You and me, just sitting in the truth we've explored together. The ache of being overlooked, the strength in staying silent, the quiet return to your own heart. Maybe you didn't expect to feel so much. Maybe you thought this would just be words on a screen. But if something stirred in you, even just a little, then this wasn't just a conversation. It was a homecoming, not to a place, but to a part of you that's been waiting. The part that remembers your laugh, your stories, your beauty, the softness you've carried, the strength you've earned. That part of you is still here. It hasn't faded. It hasn't aged out of meaning. It hasn't been erased by anyone's neglect. It's been quiet, yes, but never gone. And maybe today, for the first time in a long while, you felt it again. That little pulse of joy, of self-recognition, of peace. That is the beginning of something new. You may not have all the answers. You may still long for the call, the visit, the embrace. That's okay. Longing is not weakness. It's a sign of love, of being alive. But now, that longing no longer controls you. It no longer robs your days of color, because you've learned how to fill the spaces with something else. Something softer, more reliable, more yours. Your own rhythm, your own light. You are not in waiting anymore. You are in becoming. And if you need to be reminded again tomorrow or the next day, or the next, I'll be here. This space will be here, not with solutions, not with noise, but with companionship. A place where your experience matters, where you don't have to prove anything to be welcomed fully. Because you are not forgotten. You are not too late. You are not invisible. You are still growing, still blooming, still radiant in your own quiet way. So go ahead, stand at your window in the morning and breathe in the light like a prayer. Wear what makes you feel beautiful. Even if no one's coming by, talk to yourself kindly. Say no without guilt. Say yes to joy. Let your silence be strength. Let your presence be peace. And if the world doesn't say it enough, let me say it once more. You matter. You are worthy. You are loved. Always.